Well, welcome back, everyone, to another edition of AI Insiders from AI Marketers Guild. I'm David Berkowitz, and I'm very excited to be joined here by Drew Moffitt, who is not just one of the sharper marketers I know, but one of my favorite community organizers and folks I've gotten to geek out with in various hats that we've worn. And when Drew was sharing some of his marketing stack and processes and all this, and we're like, I was like, if you're up for having a broader audience for this, I was already learning a ton, and I couldn't wait to have him here to go and share some of how he's using using marketing to go and scale products and do some of the amazing work he's doing. So, Drew, welcome. First of all, it's great to always see you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here, and good to meet everyone. All right. Everyone see this screen, hopefully?
Yeah, very hot topic.
Yes. All right. So, just a little bit about me. I lead marketing at a company called Fonzi AI. We're a talent marketplace for hiring AI engineers. We do a reoccurring matching mechanism every month where we match a small, select, pre-vetted group of engineers with really fast-growing AI companies hiring these kind of technical roles. Also, the same parent company also owns a business named Puma Space, which is virtual office software. So I've also been leading marketing there for now 5 years. Fonzie's a few months old only. And I'm also an operating partner at Charge Ventures, which is a Brooklyn-based pre-seed company. If anyone's ever heard of Clay, I think a lot of people, given this as a MarTech business, a fun fact about Charge is that they were the pre-seed investor in Clay. So very early is kind of how the general partner, Brett, likes to invest. And then I also organize a community called Venture Sales. It's bringing together founders and investors. Originally started on a sailboat, and now it's based on land just to make my life a little easier. So that's about me. And obviously, let's get into the topic that is kind of being spoken about around the world, which is, we've seen this with the Google stock. People are selling the stock. People are thinking that Google's time of dominance is coming to an end. I'm happy to field questions about my opinions there. Obviously not investment advice, but just kind of where I think things may net out here in the future. The short story is I don't think it's as doom and gloom for Google, the business. But yeah, basically you have these LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity. Google is now obviously has Gemini, but they're doing their AI overview. But it's basically changing the way that people are getting answers to questions. It's the way I do it. I have the ChatGPT app, and any 10 seconds I want to know an answer to something, I can get a great summary of it. So definitely changing consumer behavior. Let's kind of dive in. Obviously, these are kind of the typical news headlines that we've maybe been seeing. I don't think it's these doom and gloom, especially like SEO is dead. I'm going to be showing how these things kind of intertwine. So first thing to kind of think about is how information is structured on a website, and then how you're doing content marketing and SEO, a big part of that. So historically, you obviously had your homepage, you probably had product pages, you had other case studies, maybe you had thought leadership, white papers, things of that nature. And then there's a second bucket, which often lives in people's blogs, that I'll call foundational SEO. So these are the kind of informational things that you're just creating a lot of topics. You're trying to get a lot of impressions on Google. You're trying to get a lot of web traffic, and hopefully some of those people convert. I'll show some examples here. If anyone knows who Peter Walker is, he's the head of insights at Carta, which is a cap table management tool. And I'm going to show kind of two examples of how this looks differently. Typically, foundational content is very informational. What is an AI engineer would be an example of that, or commercial. Some of those could be like listicles, like best places to find AI engineers would be that kind of. And then you obviously have short form content as LLMs are getting smarter and search engines have gotten smarter. They're starting to ingest and understand video. But obviously text-based things like tweets and LinkedIn posts and Reddit forums are other places that they're consuming information. All right. So here's kind of two examples side by side. This is both from Carta. So on the right here, you have Peter sharing an analysis about basically like funding rounds that are being announced like in the summer. And he's, kind of clustered these by year and by, funding and month. So this would be an example of like that thought leadership. A lot of times he'll post this on LinkedIn and then it'll go to a larger kind of thought leadership case study. Generally, this content isn't so keyword stuffed in any way. But on the flip side, if you look over here to the left, you have RSUs, which are restricted stock options, just, when most startups are giving out these kind of things. And this is on their blog. If you look at this article, it's something that you could pretty quickly just ask ChatGPT to write you, and it would give you kind of a pretty good answer. Or a pretty good art. So that would be an example of foundational content on the left side here. It's going to kind of say like, what is the stock, how they're work, what's the mechanics, what's the tax implication, those kind of things in the article. Alrighty. So a little bit of understanding of how we do our content SEO here at Kumo Space and Fonzi. So about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, we started using AI to do the draft. So there's a full-time team member. This person is based in the US. They draft, they come up with the topics that we're going to be drafting articles on for our blogs. And then they're planning that out. So it could be larger content pillars, and they're ensuring quality control, and they're kind of just managing this process end to end. So once they identify a topic, let's just use RSUs for an example here, restricted stock options. Then we'll send it to an AI tool that generates a long form piece of content. We use a tool called Surfer SEO. There's other ones like Byword. I personally like Surfer SEO. It started off as a content optimization tool. So what you would do is upload a blog that a human had written, and then it would tell you how to improve it. So the way that the tool works is it's creating tons of drafts, and then it's kind of picking ones that optimize, that are the best result against its optimization tool. And then we hand those off to part-time US-based content editors. Typically, we just find college students, people who are linguists majors or English majors, something that's very like language-centric majors. And what they're trying to do is just like refine the tone, clarify. Sometimes we've all heard about LLMs hallucinating. They can really go off the rails at times. So in kind of funny ways. And making sure that kind of the structure makes sense, as well as like enhancing and ensuring that the brand is being included in relevant mentions. So if we take Kumo Space, for example, Zoom, which we're using right now, is a natural competitor. A Surfer SEO article might say like top video conferencing tools are Zoom and Microsoft Teams. You would change that to be Kumo Space, Zoom, Microsoft Teams. That's an example of how you would add the branding in. And then we hand this off to someone in the Philippines to handle uploading this to CMS, getting images from iStock, where we have a subscription, as well as doing things like the title and meta descriptions with the assistance of ChatGPT Pro, and then publishing this content. And we're able to run this machine to create about 125 articles a month. So we're just doing this at a very large volume. The reason this becomes important is you're putting out a lot of content, and here are kind of the core goals of this content. So The first is just increasing that volume of content, the topics that we're covering. So from a Google SEO perspective, you have the EAT guidelines, which is expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness, and experience. So we want to just be building around those items, and then ultimately drive more traffic from traditional SEO to the website through ranking more keywords. But another thing is also earning backlinks. So, some content we'll create will be like, for Kumo Space, for example, could be a list of meeting memes or Zoom meeting memes, right? Those are the type of content. They're very easy to make. They're not competitive. They're going to rank well. And then people organically are going to start adding, referencing this meme image. So that's one of the kind of fun ways. Obviously, press is another way to get backlinks, but you want to just kind of start building domain authority. And then the other piece is that appearing in that overview that you see, that AI overview in Google search. So all of this is basically putting in a foundation for us, especially for the Fonzi business, which is now our priority as a company, to start doing thought leadership in the near future. As you have strong domain authority, as you have lots of backlinks, as you rank for lots of keywords, then that makes sense to bring in someone or have someone acting like a Peter Walker within the Fonzi line of business. So what is GEO? So there actually isn't even a defined term here. Generative engine optimization. Some people also call it Gen AI engine optimization. Some people like to call it AEO, answer engine optimization. Like, it's very new. This is, this is how much on the forefront this activity is. But generally, it's basically trying to appear in a ChatGPT answer or a Perplexity search. We've already mentioned the Google overviews, but obviously Gemini and Claude. So you're looking to appear in those answers that are getting generated dynamically for that user. The focus tends to be on like clarity, depth, and structure. These are things that LLMs particularly are good at understanding. And then, it helps the model understand the content. So the way that you surface your content, you want to make it, nice and digestible for them, and building like long-term visibility. So you can think about this just like you do content and SEO is, okay, how many clicks am I getting? How much web traffic am I getting? In the case of GEO, the focus is basically think about, like in media, how you have share of voice. That's the way to think about GEO. All right. So this is what, it looks like. Obviously, this is a little bit of a skewed result that I'm showing you here. We are doing this in one of our company ChatGPT accounts. So obviously it's pulling from memory, but the thing that's important here is you can see that it's kind of referencing that website. It's going to that website, and it's pulling information from our homepage and other parts of the website, and then simplifying and clarifying and kind of structuring this in a neat way. But before you actually appear in ChatGPT, it's probably useful to understand how an LLM is structured. So Andre Karpathy, he was previously led Tesla's autonomous driving. He does a bunch of YouTube videos where he describes something. One of his more recent videos, about 3.5 hours long. I do recommend watching it. It's pretty digestible for non-technical people. But I'll give you kind of a quick overview of it here. So in this video, he is describing how to build ChatGPT, and then he kind of is doing it live so you can see how LLMs work. So basically, an LLM is just calling a code that's acting as an assistant, and it's reading this long string of numbers that are called tokens. And what the model is trying to do in the pre-training and post-training kind of refinement of these models, the model is being rewarded at predicting the next token better, and that's how kind of the weights of the model change. So if you think about TH could be a token inside of a model, and E could also be a token inside of a model. So a statistically next most likely token after TH is probably going to be E, because there's theory, the kind of et cetera there, words that are formed from that. So as you can see right here, I have Hello Transylvania, and this is in the 4.0, ChatGPT 4.0. This is the 4 tokens that get created. As the models get more sophisticated, they have more tokens. I don't know the exact number, but I believe it's like 111,000 tokens in the 4.0 model. Smaller, earlier models are a lot smaller number of tokens. What this means is that they're just becoming, they can understand information better. But it also leads to a couple of things. One of which is hallucinations, which I have mentioned, I mentioned a few minutes ago. Typically, because the model is taught and kind of trained to be very positive, and that it should be, confident in its answers, when it doesn't know things, it'll just kind of say things, right? Because it's so confident and used to being right that it'll just kind of say something that it randomly decided was the next sequence of tokens to deliver. So that would be hallucination. The other thing is it can't often do really simple tasks. For example, there was a meme going around a couple months ago about how ChatGPT couldn't tell a user how many R's are in strawberry. So technically there's 3 R's in strawberry, and ChatGPT kept saying 2. And the reason is because it's not ingesting tokens at a single character level. It's ingesting these strings that are, pieces of a word, or punctuations or something of that nature. So as a result, it couldn't count how many R's were in strawberry. So these are some of the limitations, but it's a good understanding of kind of how to think about it. So I've kind of gone through and described, but basically he calls it like a random token tumbler. So you have this neural net that's basically sitting there, it's calculating and saying, this is the next right token to do. And that's what he's describing. This is a visualization of how that neural net functions. So how can you start thinking about the value of how you get your information as a marketer to appear inside of these LLMs? So on the long term, the data sets are trained on a data up to a certain period of time. So the newer the model, the newer we are to that, or the closer we are to that date. I think with ChatGPT 4.0, I think it's sometime in July of last year, sometime in the second half of last year. So every piece of blog content that you're creating or web content that you're being mentioned in was probably used in that training set. So you already are starting to this is why large companies like, the Zoom or Microsoft Teams has that competitive advantage to be appearing when asked what are good video conferencing tools. But in the near term, agents have recently been given, which is an LLM that basically can perform a task, the ability to go and search. So when they don't know something, what they'll do is they'll go and maybe search Bing, for example, if it's OpenAI, and then they'll take the summary of that search engine result page, and they'll take all that information and they'll summarize it into something. So this is where content and SEO actually starts to become very important in GEO, because one, if you make a lot of content and you rank well, you're going to get included in a future training set, likely. And 2, if you are searchable and you're creating that content, like what is an RSU, if ChatGPT doesn't already have RSU in its training set, it'll go to the internet and it'll search for something about RSU. And if Carta is the best result, then it's likely going to pull Carta, it'll pull some other things, and it's going to likely reference Carta pretty high. And then as further questions come up, then it'll start likely suggesting that Carta is a great cap table management tool for managing the RSUs. You can actually see chatbots, or sorry, these just like you can see Google's, crawling your website. You can now see this. So this is an example here of kind of how the OpenAI agent string of it hitting your website and actually consuming and digesting content. So really cool thing here is that unlike content and SEO, which typically takes a long period of time, GEO can happen very quickly. And we're going to kind of show this in a few moments. So that's the one piece on the content side. I'm kind of describing, this is a good comparison of how there's similarities and differences. So generally Google's ranking at, a set of results, and it's optimizing for clicks on those results and how website visitors behave once they pass through to that website. It's really working off of a couple things, interlinking within the website, the keywords. Basically this has a bunch of keywords that are relevant to this topic. So this site is good. It's focusing on the meta and title descriptions. And it's also that domain authority, the link equity. Is this the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, or is it like a no-name blog that just was started yesterday? On the GEO side, it's trying to always like take that similar information, but it's trying to structure it into an answer. But it likes to optimize for citations. It likes credence to things like, this Harvard study, right? Because it's sort of acting, as I said, it's an assistant. Is when you're typing into ChatGPT, you're effectively the code is starting off by saying be an assistant and go look. So you can kind of think of it almost like a research assistant in that capacity. So it likes things that are cited. It likes them appearing in different places. It doesn't care about links in the same way that Google does. It's able to understand. It's able to read Fonzi or Fonzi AI and understand that is a company, and it's able to search that and then gain more understanding of that company. And it often likes these mentions on other websites. So that can be Medium or Reddit, where there is overlap and similarity is they like structural data. You have to have clear hierarchy from your H1s. You need to have a well-running, traditionally people talk about technical SEO where your website runs really quickly. So you need strong performance from their HTML. Google likes that. LLMs like that because they're searching. They need to be able to do this quite quickly. And then they like relevant, recent content. So just like the New York Times or Wall Street Journal have an inherent ability to be having lots of recent content because they're always writing new business or political or international news. They like stuff that's constantly being updated. And they do well from they both benefit from schema, which is a markup in the HTML code. And they obviously have to be crawlable. All right. So here's some tricks to get it right. So when you write your blog, you have your blog schema, which basically just tells a crawler that this is a blog page. And then there's often going to be an FAQ that's at the bottom of that. Historically, Google has really liked these FAQs as they started to do these additional featured SERPs. And now LLMs also really like them. And they're typically a question answer thing of if we go to, what is an RSU example is before, it'll just be that. And it'll have a short paragraph, maybe 50 words. That's really great for an LLM because they find that they know this is a question answer. They know that structure. And that's basically what they're trying to, as the assistant to the human, surface back in Claude or ChatGPT. They love structured information. So if you have an infographic, trying to turn that infographic into text-based, it'll just help more than having it in an image. So, tables, bullets, they like, as we said, the structured headers. They still want the backlinks because they need to find you. Right, they need you to appear at high-end searches, things of that, or they need to find your website or your business in other places. Funny enough, they really like Medium. Um, and they don't seem to either they seem to understand, or in the training sets, they have been kind of told to just ignore the fact that like you can write your own Medium articles. So at Fonzie, what we do is we take some of our blogs and then we rewrite them with Surfer and re-edit them and then upload them to Medium. And in an LLM's mind, like, oh, Medium is this highly, high domain authority, and it's talking about Fonzie. So let's, Fonzie, I should go look at Fonzie. They like a lot of social media presence as well. So they'll consume information on various platforms. You can, lightly game this by just being very active in places like Reddit. They particularly like forums. So if there's a long Reddit thread, and in that Reddit thread, there's a bunch of, it's talking about AI engineering and how to get AI engineering roles. And there's a couple of comments that are talking about Fonzie, it'll consume that. And unlike where Google wants backlinks, and that probably violates most forums' community guidelines, LLMs just want the name of Fonzie, and it'll go and find Fonzie on its own search. And then it's always great to leverage influencers and media coverage because, again, they want to have a breadth, a lot of content being talked about and appearing that references the same business or the business service.
One question I'd love to ask is looking at Reddit in particular, right? Like I think that Reddit is scary in some ways, not because of like, its old reputation as more of a free for all for content, but more that like you don't want to go and get knocked by the moderators and and like share something that seems overly spammy. Like for something like Fonzie, are you ever going in and talking about Fonzie yourself? Is that all through influencers? If it's the latter, like how do you even find people to bring it up? Like how do you approach Reddit specifically?
Yeah. So, just as I was describing with the content process, we have a similar kind of process in place around enhancing GEO. So it's, repurposing content on Medium, but it's doing a big campaign on Reddit. And we were also separately starting to do our own media and influencer, which will also help. But on the Reddit piece particularly, I believe we run 5 accounts. And it's not, you try to just be value add. So you're going to find topics that are talking about engineering, and you just kind of add to it. Right. And it doesn't necessarily mean every post, and you definitely shouldn't be for every post sitting there and putting, Fonzie, but when it's relevant, you do that. Otherwise, you're just kind of engaging. So you're trying to build positive karma across these accounts. And we kind of structure them as different personas. So it's an engineering persona. One's the brand, right? So we make our own threads and have our own, subreddit that we're kind of posting on. And then the others is like, basically a brand and a candidate, not brand, a company, like a recruiter at a company, and then also candidates, because that's what our talent marketplace does, is it matches hiring teams with highly vetted candidates. So we're kind of participating in both of those places. But yes, my suggestion is have a team member who knows a lot about or is an avid Redditor. I am not, fortunately, the person who oversees our content process as a whole. Our content marketer, she loves reading on Reddit, so that's an inherent advantage. I would caution people about this going into Reddit if you didn't have that existing understanding of kind of the mechanisms.
Great points there. There was a question from Michael also. Is there any risk of over-engineering content for GEO and having it feel like it's just written for AI bots and not humans?
So yes, it's why we choose to have the human copy editor, that part-time person, in the process. Generally, you aren't really over-engineering. You shouldn't be thinking about over-engineering it. It's more that you should be focusing on your FAQs and blog. Your blog and FAQ is just having these structures. So like a good blog article, it should have probably an infographic or a table or it should have citations. So doing those things are what they like, but it's also in line with like good readability from a human perspective. And then the FAQ is you're just trying to tailor them a little bit more towards commonly asked questions that people would likely ask a ChatGPT, if that makes sense. It's not, these are smart systems that can effectively think for themselves, or can, do a thinking related task. So it's more about it's not like 2002 Google SEO where like people are just doing a bunch of really bad practices. Here, the system is so much smarter now. That these LLMs are smart enough that they just need to be able to consume information, and they're going to rewrite it in a way that works for them.
Nice. And one other I'm curious about is you talked about how much content you're creating that, and especially for company of Fonzie so early stage, right? Like this isn't some Fortune 500. Like that sounds like a lot, and I'm wondering, is this something that it's like you've gone and seen like just like more is better? Is there even any formula for like how much is too much? Like if you don't produce that much, can you still be in the game? Are you screwed if you're only producing a few pieces of GEO friendly content a week? Like how'd you even come to this decision?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that's important to understand is that I view content and SEO and GEO is like the burger and the fries. They go together completely. So it's not like you should be creating GEO content and SEO content. It's just creating SEO content and being cognizant of GEO and doing these extra off-page things like being in Medium, participating in Reddit forums, earning media coverage, working with influencers, etc. And then as far as the volume, we have just been able to scale it from an efficiency perspective. So I don't think that I definitely don't think you have to do 125. It's just that's where we're able to have scaled it. And it's a decision to move very fast. I don't think there is a punitive, I'm unaware of any upper bound where there's a punitive number. But you could also just be kind of running your own system like this as a very part-time, one person's doing this part-time, as they do other marketing tasks. And you could be doing 10 or 20 or 30 kind of blogs a month. It's just, we have the ability, we're venture backed. So we're like, let's move quickly.
Some more good questions coming in the chat. When working with influencers, from Zach Rosga here, when working with influencers, is there a higher value to written posts or video?
It's a good question. So for the Kumo Space line of business, about 40% of our revenue comes inbound through influencers of short-term form video. The benefit there is that TikTok and Instagram Reels, there's ability, if you get a creator, they can go very viral, right? So that creates a ton of social proof that an LLM might want to consume. You have a video with 100 million views, sorry, not 100 million views, I wish. 1 million views, it might have 100,000 likes, right? That's an example of just like a lot of effective citation that this is something of interest that people are like liking and LLMs will consume. The one challenge is that they're not particularly great at understanding video yet. I know there's limitations. I don't know the technical specs there. You can see these AI video making tools are getting better, which means that they're understanding how to consume the information better. But yes, text is the easiest thing for them to consume. I think it isn't, I wouldn't define your marketing strategy as one versus the other. I would define it as like, does this channel work for my, buyer? In the case of Kumo Space, LinkedIn is not a particularly great channel for us, but TikTok and Reels is from an influencer perspective. So that's why the focus would remain there, even though I think that being on LinkedIn or even like influencers on Reddit in a text-based form would likely, in today's sense of the model, be smarter. There is a saying in Silicon Valley right now, which is just like, assume the model is going to get better and it's going to get better at exponential speed. So effectively, if you're kind of making that assumption, it doesn't really matter, because in the near future, the training set for the 2026 models is going to be on videos from 2025.
Hmm. And then the last question I'll ask, because I want to make sure to hear a few more of your tips and thoughts. But the B2B versus B2C questions coming up a few times. And I'll even ask more specifically, because I think it's where a couple folks are going. And I've had this problem too of working with some very niche B2B companies that maybe it's not an area like, say, recruiting that people are talking about a lot in forums like Reddit. Are there any best practices when you have like a more highly specialized, less vocal fields? And,
Yeah, I think like, going back at looking at our Kumo-based line of business, 100% of our revenue comes inbound. It comes through content SEO and now some GEO. It comes through the influencer, and it comes from kind of brand building activities related to PR and speaking appearances and just like natural word of mouth. The channels that don't work for that business is ads, for example. It's a very unfortunate thing. Like the ads do not work. Everyone in the category that's used ads has basically shuttered because it spent so much. So I'm not, the reason I'm telling this story is that as much as I wish every tactic worked well for a company, there are just going to be some companies where content SEO may not work, and therefore GEO doesn't make any sense. But what we have found in the case of Kumo Space, that's $20 a month B2B. The typical buyer is like a remote marketing agency or a service remote company that's often providing a service, accounting, marketing, etc. So that is a B2B sale. It's a pretty low price point. So influencer works for us in that regard. But I would say think about and try to understand where your customer lives. That's going to give you the best example. If you're super niche, a potentially better way to think about this is, okay, can I build a community? Like Clay is a good example of this. They have built an amazing community, online community around using the tool and creating the go-to-market engineer, which is this technical marketer. And then people come there and they're only talking about kind of Clay. They're only talking about some cool table they made or some data enrichment they did or some personalization they did to an email. And they keep coming back. And if you can kind of maintain that, that community, especially in an online way, then, LLMs will start ingesting that information if you make it crawlable and indexable. So that would be kind of a niche example that was historically the category didn't even exist a few years ago.
Awesome. Well, I know there's a bit more coming in, but why don't you keep going so we can at least see a bit more.
I think I have 2 more slides, so we're pretty near the end.
Awesome.
I just wanted to share a couple of tools that are particularly useful. I mentioned Surfer SEO. This is where we write or get the first drafts from the blog. SEMrush has been a long-standing tool for SEO. None of these tools today yet have a GEO component in the sense of like predictions or telling you what you should write about. But if you go to, let's say, SEMrush, and you look up a keyword, it'll have some of the suggested keywords will be formed in questions, right? That's where you can think that what that is saying is these are commonly Googled questions. You can extrapolate from that those are commonly asked questions of, say, ChatGPT. And that would be how you would leverage a tool like SEMrush to make and structure those FAQs at the bottom of that blog article that is about that keyword topic. Geostar and Profound. Profound just raised a bunch of money. These are 2 companies that are trying to kind of become SEMrush, but specifically for GEO. We use Geostar. It's a small Brooklyn-based company. It's kind of pre-seed. It's growing quickly. The reason we chose them is that the co-founders are super hands-on. They're still doing a lot of customer discovery, so we're able to Slack with them. So we're able to kind of get that like very personalized support. So that's why I would recommend them over probably Profound, even though Profound just raised, I think, like a $30 million Series A. And then ChatGPT in general is just like a useful tool. We use it. If you don't know what prompt engineering is, I suggest doing some Googling or ChatGPTing what prompt engineering is. It's basically structuring, for those who don't know, it's structuring information. So instead of saying, hey, write me a meta description, you structure as like, here's the task, here's information that you should consume in this task, and here's how the output should look. So when you structure the information that way, LLMs tend to give you a better result. That's how we get our titles, our meta descriptions written using ChatGPT. And generally, you can just also do things like ask a question, see how ChatGPT kind of reacts. And now you may inform how you could write FAQs or content. And going back to the Reddit stuff, that's largely done by the full-time person in the Philippines. But she just is taking information from that thread in Reddit and then putting that into ChatGPT and then coming up with kind of a thoughtful answer. There are some tricks. Try to sit there and Google ways to make content not look like LLM generated. The most common one is called M dash. It's the very long dash. LLMs love this. It's something related to the post-training model set. They're being rewarded because it looks very nice visually for a human. I love looking at it, but once you see it and once you know that it's common of LLMs, anytime you see someone send or write a post with that, you're like, oh my gosh, this must be AI generated. So these are some tools. This graphic is out of date, but I think it's a good illustration of how quickly you can kind of get progress in GEO. So we only started our blog the last week of April for Fonzi. And we, at that time, had a 0% visibility score in Geostar, the GEO tool that we use. Today, I think we're at like 23%. At the time of this screenshot, we were at 18. So you're talking basically like 8 weeks. We've gone from 0 to 23%. What does 23% mean? So these tools, what they do is they have a list of questions that you feed them things about your business, and then they expand that into a larger list of questions. And I believe in this case, it's about 200. And then every day it pings ChatGPT and Perplexity and kind of other tools, and sees how ChatGPT and Perplexity and Gemini respond. And if they respond with an answer that includes a reference to your business, in this case, Fonzi. So now the way to think about this score is that of those 200 plus questions on the most recent data sets or pinging, it was 23% of those answers contained Fonzi. And then additionally, this kind of tool, it lets you go and you see the citations that it's referencing. Often it'll be kind of referencing, oh, there was this thread on Reddit that was about AI engineering, and this is where Fonzi was mentioned. Or it'll be showing that it was actually going to Fonzi's, doing a search and going to this blog article on Fonzi's website. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Happy to answer any more questions. We've got another few minutes here. If anyone ever wants to reach out or get in touch, it's drew@fonzi.ai. And this is also my LinkedIn. But yeah, let me know if there's other questions. I'll let David kind of moderate.
Yeah. Anyone else want to chime in? I also did share the link in the chat for where you can share your thoughts after, including any of your own experiences. So you can, we can continue the conversation that way too. But who's got something we haven't covered yet.
I do, but I'm off
Okay.
camera. I'm sorry, I'm off camera.
Also, can you hear from? Oh,
Yeah, we'll do Kate and then Ken.
Okay. I work with a lot of entertainment.
sure. Ladies
brands.
first, absolutely.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, here, I'm just going to mute Ken.
I work with a lot of entertainment companies whose websites are very video experience based. And I know the challenges with being able to, sort of crawl and ingest video content. So I'm just wondering, outside of third party earned media and, things like that, are there any strategies specifically for websites that are video based?
Sorry, say that last piece again, please.
Are there any strategies specifically for videos for websites that are video based?
I don't have a particularly excellent answer for you because although Kumo Space is a video centric tool and we do a lot of influencer marketing, it is not the primary focus of our parent business. Fonzi now is. So historically we were focused on Kumo Space when it wasn't, when GEO wasn't really a thing. I would go back to my earlier quote kind of where Silicon Valley's head is at today, which is assume the models are going to get better. So I think it will be a self-solving problem in probably 6 to 18 months. That the AI tools are going to be able to ingest and understand video a lot better. Hopefully it's like a decent answer. I know that's probably not the most ideal one. Thing on that, I also would be a little cautious of buying any tooling that says like in this moment of time we're the thing, because that sort of like fights this instinct that the models will get better. So it's like you don't maybe use a monthly tool, but I wouldn't do like a long annual commitment if you were to find a tool like that.
Right. Thanks, Kate. Other questions that Drew, you're getting?
Oh, and one other thing that just comes to mind is like doing a lot of alt text in there is probably going to be really helpful. Like making sure that the alt text is informative. Another potential strategy would be that pops to mind is transcribing. So sometimes like a piece of video content like will be at the top, and then you'll see like the transcription. People that are podcasters who do like a video recording will often kind of have done this historically to make themselves more digestible by Google search. So those would be, and again, I would lead into the FAQs. At the bottom, if it's a media company, a bunch of videos, then I would kind of have a longer FAQ section at the bottom of that homepage that's kind of helping describe what's happening above, in the sense of like, if you are a company that makes commercials, right, you're going to have all these Super Bowl ads that you've made. And then at the bottom, you kind of have a bunch of questions about like making Super Bowl ads and answers to those.
Excellent.
I had a question.
Yep.
Two questions. This is Ken Jay from BCM. Two questions. One I put in the chat, but there was a lot of questions coming in at that time.
Yeah.
For content pages, content chunking is getting a lot of news. That the subsections of a piece of content are becoming just as important as the overall topic. And then my other question was related to the new LLMs text format, kind of the robots.txt for LLMs, and if you had any thoughts on that.
The first one, I think I'm drawing a blank on understanding your question. So if you could maybe just clarify that a little more.
Sure. Content chunking, just chunks of content, and where subtopics that are properly formatted with their headings, their H2 headings or whatever that might be, are becoming, are just as important to LLMs, as a subtopic as it relates to the greater topic.
Yeah, I think I think I'm understanding your question is that if you have a, say, 3,000 word blog article, it, part of that article may be an H2 with some H3s that's specifically talking about something that's a sub version of the master topic. For example, like the RFUs, it would be like taxation. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
So content chunking is the term that's getting some buzz. There's articles on all the SEO sites, blogs, and
got it. Yeah, I hadn't read any of that, or read that term, I guess is the right answer. Yes, no. Having a really well structured information is key. Having those H1s and H2s, H3s, etc., working correctly. And then, having those paragraphs kind of be self-describing so they can effectively act like a larger FAQ. Right? It's what is the tax implications of RSUs, and then it's information about taxes and IRS and stuff like that. That's the way I would think about it.
A larger FAQ is a good way to describe that. Yeah. So it's a section and it's got a very detailed output about that particular FAQ or subtopic.
Yeah, and I think the only thing to focus there is just making sure that it still reads pretty naturally. So generally, like the articles that are getting made are like hundreds of thousands of words. So typically, as SEO, Surfer SEO is making us like 2,000 plus, sometimes even 5,000 words. So it will have those kind of inherently in them. And then, if you could remind me the second question again.
Oh yeah, LLMs.text.
Yes. So this is funny. I'm gonna just lean into what Silicon Valley's groupthink is right now, which is the models are gonna get smarter. We have actually ran into this problem that in order to do certain things that are quote enabling towards LLMs, the tooling doesn't yet exist. So like we were trying to do something with Framer, which is how we run the Fonzi website, and it doesn't work because it's not supported with Framer unless you like pay their custom plan, which is like $6,000 a year. Or we build a reverse proxy in Cloudflare on the enterprise account level. So what I'm sort of saying is that I don't think it really matters that much, and I don't think that it will matter so much in the future because the LLMs are already interacting with content that aren't doing this. And to do it in a lot of cases is super onerous. It's not like built into, popular CMS tools yet. Yeah, that was a silly experience of us trying to figure this out. We have a very technical team who's building AI agents, and we were just like, this is idiotic. That it doesn't yet exist.
Well, it sounds like an incredible team you have there. I've obviously met a few of them, and so not surprised you're with some of the best and folks that trying to use some of these breakthrough strategies here. I don't know if you've been following. I'm happy to share after. You've been getting a ton of great feedback in the chat. I know people are finding this tremendously useful. So, and it's also, it's just so refreshing to see someone just willingly share so much of what they know. Right. So, glad we got some tool ideas, strategies, tactics. We got everything here. So Drew, thank you. You're always welcome back. You've also been a great supporter of First Wednesday and a lot of the community work we do. So thank you for all of it. And I hope many of our attendees here get to stay in touch with you and keep learning from you.
Thank you, guys.